Life and Exploration of David Livingston, Part 41. It is now time again to take up the further adventures of Mr. Stanley to follow up upon his long journey back to the abode of civilization. From Zanzibar, he sailed across the Indian Ocean to Bombay, whence he transmitted dispatches announcing the success which he had crowned his long labors and journeyings. It was this intelligence, transmitted so fully through the London office of the New York Herald, which so gratifyingly startled the world about the time of the anniversary of the American independence of 1872. From Bombay, Mr. Stanley proceeded to Europe by way of the Suez Canal, reaching Aden, southwestern Arabia, July 11, Port Said, the head of the Suez Canal, on the 18th, and arrived at Marseille, France, on the 24th. Here he was received with kindest welcome, and to some extent besieged by gentlemen of his own profession, who transmitted to their journals accounts of his doings. At Paris, a few days afterwards, he was received with exhilarating hospitality by the American residents of the city, and was lionized generally, breakfasting with Honorable Elihu B. Washburn, American minister. He was there met among other distinguished guests General William T. Sherman, the commanding officer of the Army of the United States, about contemplating a tour of Europe and the Levant. The general occupied much of the time in examining Mr. Stanley's maps and discharging some of his fund of caustic humor on the prevalence of the East African slave trade. On July 30, the minister Washburn and many other Americans in Paris extended a formal invitation to Mr. Stanley to meet them at a banquet where they might in a body testify their high appreciation of the indomitable courage, energy, and perseverance which crowned with such brilliant success your efforts to find Dr. Livingston, as well as to express their sense of the enterprise and liberality of the New York Herald in sending forth on such an extraordinary mission. Mr. Stanley's reply to this cordial invitation was so modest, so happily expressed, that it is worthy of a place here. They then quote that reply, which I will not, out of interest of holding your interest. The meeting was one of great enjoyment. The American minister, after a happy speech richly flavored with American allusions, proposed the guest of the evening, Henry M. Stanley, the discoverer of the discoverer. We honor him for his courage, energy, fidelity, and we rejoice in the triumphant success of his mission, which has gained him imperishable renown and conferred additional credit to the American name. To this the traveler responded felicitously, and was specially eloquent when speaking of the great explorer of Africa. A number of distinguished gentlemen, artists, journalists, public men, addressed the meeting. The assemblage adjourned at a late hour. Mr. Stanley, strongly impressed with the difference between the Parisian banquet and the African supper of Manioc and hippopotamus, other honors flew upon him thick and fast. From scientific and literary bodies and from distinguished persons he received invitations to accept which would have occupied him a year. These things do not go to the author of a hoax, however magnificent. The traveler correspondent could not longer remain at the fashionable metropolis, and at once departed for England. His reception in England was most cordial on the part of most intelligent persons, but there was a feeling of national chagrin, if one may so speak, on account of discovery of Dr. Livingston having been brought about through American enterprise, which vented itself in no little carping criticism and the discharge of British arbitrariousness. Hence at once originated that skepticism in regard to the discovery of the great explorer which continued to becloud some minds and journals for a number of weeks. but the publication of Dr. Livingston's several official dispatches, already largely quoted from in this work, and the prompt production of other evidence heretofore mentioned brought the English people quite generally to the acknowledgment of the truth. At the annual meeting of the British Association for the Advancement of Science, which convened at Brighton, August 14, W.B. Carpenter, LL.D., in the chair, Mr. Stanley's successful mission was handsomely mentioned, and he was twice compelled to rise in acknowledgment of calls and cheers. Ex-Emperor Napoleon III of France was present and joined in the applause. Here, at another meeting, Mr. Stanley read a paper on Tanganyika Lake, which was greatly praised, and about this time there was meetings of many scientific associations at Brighton, to all of which Mr. Stanley was invited on the occasion of what has been called the Brighton Banquet, it being a dinner given to the British Association by the Brighton and Sussex Medical Society. Mr. Stanley appeared late in the evening, and being soon called out, responded to some remarks of the previous speaker in such a way as to create some feeling. Good nature at last prevailed, and harmony was restored among the English servants. But his honors in England did not stop below the recognition of his fine success by royalty itself. Early in September he was invited to an interview with Queen Victoria, and afterwards dined with her and the members of the royal family present at Balmoral. Upon this occasion the Queen is reported to have expressed to him in the most warm and friendly terms her congratulations on the successful result of the American enterprise in furnishing intelligence of the English traveler in Africa, his condition of health, his discoveries, and his hopes for the future previous to his return to Great Britain. Mr. Stanley could hardly be left in a happier situation than partaking of a right royal dinner with Her Majesty of England. Chapter 13. Slave Trade of East Africa. While waiting for supplies in Uyeyambe, Dr. Livingston wrote a second letter to Mr. James Gordon Bennett, which was principally devoted to the slave trade of East Africa, so to greatly aid in the abolition of which would be more gratifying to the explorer's ambition than to discover all the sources of the Nile. This might as well be supposed from what has already been quoted from Dr. Livingston's dispatches to his government. But inasmuch as he here directly appeals to the American people, this volume would be incomplete without the remarkable and most thrillingly interesting statements of the letter in question. They were sent by telegram cable from London and appeared in the Herald newspaper of July 1872. Quote, "At present let me give a glimpse of the slave trade to which the search and discovery of most of the Nile fountains have brought me face to face. The whole traffic, whether by land or ocean, is a gross outrage on the common law of mankind, and is carried out from age to age, and in addition to the evils it inflicts, presents almost insurmountable obstacles to intercourse between different portions of the human family. This open sore in the world is partly owing to human cupidity, partly to the ignorance of the more civilized of mankind of the blight which chiefly lights on more degraded piracy on the high seas. It was once as common as slave trading is now, but as it became thoroughly known, the whole civilized world rose up against it. In now trying to make East African slave trade better known to Americans, I indulge the hope I am aiding on, though in a small degree, the good time coming yet when slavery as well as piracy will be chased from the world. Many have but a faint idea of the evils that trading in slaves inflicts on the victims and authors of its atrocities. Most people imagine that Negroes, after being brutalized by a long course of servitude, with but few of the ameliorating influences that elevate the more favored races, are fair average specimens of the African man. Our ideas are derived from slaves of the West Coast, who have for ages been subject to domestic bondage and all the depressing agencies of a most unhealthy climate. These have told most injuriously on their physical frames, while fraud and the rum trade have ruined their moral natures, and so as to not discriminate the difference of the monstrous injustice. The main body of the population is living free in the interior under their own chiefs and laws, cultivating their own farms, catching fish in their own rivers, and fighting bravely with the grand old denizens of the forest, which in more recent continents can only be reached in rocky strata and under perennial ice. Winwood Reade hit the truth when he said the ancient Egyptian, with his large, round, black eyes, full, luscious lips, and somewhat depressed nose, is far nearer the typical Negro than the West Coast African, who has been debased by the unhealthy land he lives in. The slaves generally, and especially those on the West Coast at Zanzibar and elsewhere, are extremely ugly. I have no prejudice against their color. Indeed, anyone who lives long amongst them forgets they are even black and feels they are just fellow men. But the low, retreating forehead, prognathious jaws, lark heels, other physical peculiarities common among slaves and West African Negroes always awaken some feelings of aversion akin to those with which the view specimens of the Bill Skies and Bruiser class in England. I would not utter a syllable calculated to press down either class more deeply in the mire in which it is already sunk, but I wish to point out that these are not typical Africans any more than typical Englishmen, and that the natives on nearly all the high lands of the interior of the continent are, as a rule, fair average specimens of humanity. I happened to be present when all the head men of the great chief Masama, who lives west of the south end of Tanganyika, had come together to make peace with certain Arabs, and who had burned their chief town, and I am certain one could not see more finely formed intellectual heads as at an assembly in London or Paris, and the faces and forms corresponded finely with the well-shaped heads. Masama himself had been a sort of Napoleon for fighting and conquering in his younger days. He was exactly like the ancient Assyrians sculptured on the Nineveh marbles, as Nimrod and others, and he showed himself to be one of ourselves by habitually indulging in copious portions of beer called pombe, and had become what Nathaniel Hawthorne called a bulbous below the ribs. I do not know where the phrase bloated atrocity arose. It must be American, for I have had glimpses of a good many English noblemen, and Masama was only specimen of a bloated aristocrat on whom I ever set my eyes. Many of the women are very pretty, and like all ladies, would have been much prettier if they had only let themselves alone. Fortunately, the dears could not change charming black eyes, beautiful foreheads, nicely round limbs, well-shaped forms, and small heads and feet, but must adorn themselves, and this they did so filling splendid teeth and points like cat's teeth. Oh, they do so by filing splendid teeth to points like cat's teeth. It was distressing, for it made their smile look like that of a crocodile. Ornaments scarce, they are not black, but of light, warm brown color, and so very sisterish. If I may use the word, it feels an injury done to oneself to see a bit of grass stuck through the cartilage of the nose so as to bulge out the allonazzi, or wing of the nose, of the anatomists. Kazembe's queen, Moraya Nyemba by name, would be esteemed a royal beauty either in London, Paris, or New York, and yet she had a small hole through the cartilage near the tip of her fine, slightly aquiline nose. But she had only filled one side of two of the front of her superb snow-white teeth, and then, what a laugh she had! Let those who wish to know go and see her. She was carried to her farm in a pony phaeton, which is a sort of throne, fastened on two very long poles and carried by 12 stalwart citizens. If they take the punch motto of Kazembe, niggers don't require to be shot here, as their own, they may show themselves to be men, but whether they do or not, Kazembe will show himself a man of sterling good sense. Now these people, like ourselves, externally have brave, genuine human souls. Rua, large sections of country northwest of Kazembe, still in some inland region, is peopled with men very like those of Wasama and Kazembe. An Arab, Syed ben Habib, was sent to trade in Rua 2 years ago, and as Arabs usually do where natives have no guns, Syed bin Habib, elder brother, carried matters with a high hand. The Rua men observed the elder brother slept in a white tent, and pitching spears into it by night killed him. As Muslims never forgive blood, the younger brother forthwith ran amok on all the discriminately in a large district. Let it not be supposed any of these people are, like American Indians, insatiable, bloodthirsty savages who would not be reclaimed to entertain terms of lasting friendship with fair-dealing strangers. Had the actual murderers been detained and a little time granted, I feel morally certain, from many other instances among tribes who, like the Barua, have not been spoiled by Arab traders, they would all have been given up. The chiefs of the country would first of all have specified the crime of which the elder brother was guilty, and who had led to avenge it. It's very likely that they would have stipulated no other should be punished but the actual perpetrator, the domestic slave acting under his orders being considered free of blame. I know nothing that distinguishes the uncontaminated African from other degraded peoples more than their entire reasonableness and good sense. It is different after they have had wives, children, and relatives kidnapped, but that is more than human nature, civilized or savage, can bear. In the chase in question, indiscriminate slaughter, capture, and plunder took place. A very large number of very fine young men were captured and secured in chains and wooden yokes. I came near the party of Syed ben Habib, close to the point where a huge rent in the mountain of Ruah allows the escape of the great river Luababa out of Great Lake Mura. And here I had for the first time an opportunity of observing the difference between slaves and free men made captive. When fairly across the river Lualaba, Syed ben Habib thought his captives safe and got rid of the trouble of attending to and watching the chained gangs by taking off both chains and yokes. All declared joy and perfect willingness to follow Syed to the end of the world or elsewhere, but next morning 22 made clear of the mountains. Many more, seeing the broad Lualaba roll between them and the homes of their infancy, lost all heart, and in 3 days 8 of them died. They had no complaint but pain in their heart, and they pointed out its seat correctly, though many believed the heart situated underneath the top of the sternum or breastbone. This, to me, was the most startling death I ever saw. They evidently die of broken-heartedness, and the Arabs wondered, seeing they had plenty to eat.